Welcome to Becoming Church, the podcast where we discuss how the message and movement of Jesus is not just about becoming Christians, but about becoming the church. I'm your host, Kristin Mockler-Young, and I'm so glad you are joining the conversation. Welcome back to Becoming Church. We are about to experience something that we have never experienced before here on this podcast. I am bringing you our guest all the way from Australia, Dave Adamson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having. You've never had an Australian on before?
No.
Really?
First.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad I can be a pioneer in this space.
Yes. I'm pretty sure people are going to listen just because of your accent. I'm not going to lie. They're already like, I'm here, I'm in.
When I was living in the US, I lived in the US for 14 years, and basically I got speaking gigs purely because of my accent.
I believe
it opened doors.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a ridiculous question, but if I don't, my children will never forgive me. So you already know what's coming.
This is going to be a Bluey question.
Yeah. Do you watch it? Do you I can see them being like, Mom, does he know Bluey and Bingo? Which obviously they're cartoons on Disney Plus. Who wouldn't know them?
I know of it. My kids are older, so they grew out of that phase, that Bluey audience demographic long before Bluey came out. But I get asked that question enough by American friends. Yeah, again, being I lived in Atlanta for like 7 years, and I lived in New Jersey for 5 or 6 years. And so I've got a lot of friends who are almost like family to me. And so they're constantly, I get asked the question about Bluey, and can you just please do a video for my kids and say, they give me lines to say out of Bluey. It's actually hilarious. It's good. I like the fact that, something that is, it's kind of a thing of pride. We love that the fact that there's something that's created in Australia is having such a big impact on the next generation right around the whole world. That's kind of cool. It's what we're all trying to do as pastors, right?
Yes, exactly. If only we were little blue cartoon dogs, maybe we could have more success sometimes with a larger demographic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Is it the phenomenon there that it is here?
Oh, yeah, exactly the same. Well, is it? It is. It's really big. I would say it's probably bigger in the US than it is in Australia for two reasons. One, obviously the accent is a huge part of that.
Sure.
But second, what a lot of Americans don't understand or haven't put together. Australia as a landmass is about the same size as the US. Australia's a little bit taller, and the US is a little bit wider from a country point of view. But we've got like 26 million people here, whereas you all have 320 million or something. And so just the market is a lot bigger there. So it feels like, it's probably the same percentage of people in America as in Australia watch Bluey, but because that number is so much larger, it seems like it's so much bigger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, if you have not watched it, and for anybody who's listening, I don't care if you have children or not, it is the most well-written show that I have seen in years.
Today's show is brought to you by Bluey.
Yes, exactly. Disney Plus. Let's go. We belly laugh, we cry. It's amazing. My girls will get off of this, I promise, in just a second. But my girls will look at me and be like, Mom, this one's going to make you cry. Like they already just know.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
So it's amazing. Well, the reason that we actually have you on today, Dave, is that you wrote a book that I listened to, and I have already posted on my social media multiple times because it was truly, I think, revolutionary. And it's called MetaChurch: How to Use Digital Ministry to Reach People and Make Disciples. Tell us a little bit about how you even got into the digital ministry world.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. Thank you for reading the book. I know you listened to it on Audible, and I know that was a huge part of it because you just thought I was a blue dog, and you put yourself in that mind. That's why you read it so quick. I get it. That's why we did the Audible version, because we wanted to lean into that side.
Brilliant.
Look, I grew up I didn't grow up in a home that went to church at all. So I was completely unchurched, and had no intention of ever being in full-time. That's not something I wanted to do. Yeah. When I was in grade 11 at high school, that's when I started following Jesus, and that obviously changed my life. But even then, I didn't want to go into full-time ministry. All I wanted to be was a sports reporter. That was my goal since I was a little kid. And so I continued to pursue that path as a Christian and started working for newspapers and then magazines. I became the editor of Australia's highest selling sports magazine. And then from there went to TV, and I was a TV sports reporter for nearly 8 years at one of the 3 major networks in Australia on a show that was essentially our version of ESPN Sports Center. And, you know, I thought I was in my dream job. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And then God called me into ministry. And little did I know, this was in 2008, little did I know that the skills that I had been developing as a communicator, as a field producer and a field director, but also the on-camera skills that I was doing when I was doing live crosses and things like that, that God was actually using those things and establishing those things in me for this new thing that I was going to step into, which, you know, in 2008, there was only a handful of online pastors in the world, but this forward-thinking church in New Jersey reached out to me. And, you know, they said, hey, we think you're the guy we've been looking for. Would you be interested in coming out and interviewing for this position as an online pastor? And so in 2008, I became an online pastor. Didn't know what that was at the time. It was really brand spanking new. But yeah, this is one of those occasions where God was really playing, you know, he's playing 3D chess and I'm off playing, you know, Connect 4, because, you know, he's at this whole different level than I am, but he was using these skills and these gifts that I've been developing for years and years and years to go into this new space. And that's really where it started. I became the online pastor of a church in New Jersey in 2008 and grew that, you know, obviously from nothing, because it wasn't really something that existed previously. And then in 2013, we went down to Atlanta and I became the online and social media pastor at North Point, where Andy Stanley is the lead pastor. And I did that for the next 7 or so years. And really this book, what I wanted to do with the book is just take everything that I learned. Look, I've been given this crazy, unique opportunity that, you know, was given to me by God. I 100% believe that, to be on the front end of something that was changing in the church. And I got to do that at some really influential churches, and I got to make mistakes and fail forward and put away things that didn't work and build on things that were working. And so really what I wanted to do in 2020 was when I started processing this idea of writing the book, when, you know, the pandemic shut down churches and you know, the live stream became mainstream because everybody had to do that. And I was dealing with calls from churches from around the world trying to help them get onto their live stream for the very first time. And this was something I'd been already doing for 12 years. And so it was at the end of that, and when my family and I moved back to Australia, that I was like, I really need to write down all of my experiences and all of the things that I've learned. And so that's really how the book came about. And I really wanted it to be, Kristin, I really wanted to focus on it being a book that was both philosophical in that, hey, here's the theological pushback I often get around online church, but also practical, and not practical in here's how you beat the algorithm on Instagram, because that's going to change in 3 months and the book becomes irrelevant. What I wanted to do was to create a practical strategy for what I believe is the next iteration of church. And that is MetaChurch. Now, for your audience who maybe have heard of the metaverse, or maybe think of Meta as being the new name for Facebook, it's not a book about the church in the virtual reality. That word meta is just a prefix, which means to transform, as in the word metamorphosis, or it means to go beyond, as in the word metaphysical. And so my thought around it, my experience tells me that the church needs to transform. It needs to change its model to go beyond just a Sunday time slot, just a building, and reach the community for the other 167 hours of the week outside of that 1 hour on Sunday. And so that requires a changing of the model. And this is where, you know, being at one of the biggest mega churches in the world, most influential mega churches, I started to realize, I think the future is not mega church, but meta church, that a church that transforms its model and goes beyond just a building, goes beyond just a Sunday time slot, and can reach people who live within driving distance of the church building, who otherwise don't know that the church even exists. And we have the technology to do that. Like, we're able to, and it's free. We don't have to do anything. Like, the world has created this great tool for us to, for the first time in human history, to literally go into all the world in a second, if we leverage it really well and if we're strategic about it. And this is where I really wanted to provide some a resource that help people think innovatively. I think in church world, we have a fear of innovation across the board. And so I really just wanted to do something that was practical and incorporated all the experiences that I've had and hopefully told some stories that were interesting. But at the end of the day, I wanted people to put it down and go, I feel like I know what to do in my next step, whatever that looks like in your context. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Well, and I think you did a phenomenal job with that. Like you said, the first half felt theological, and I have all kinds of notes because I'm like, yes, I want to quote this. And yes, I need to tell people, because I was just listening like, why don't more people understand? But then the second half of the book, I have a ton of notes. And I made my to-do list like 19 times longer. Thank you for that, Dave, because I'm like, I now need to know. It's fantastic because you truly did give practicals for podcasts, for YouTube. I mean, for so many things, and you walk people through exactly how to do it. So we will get to some more of that later, but I just wanted to let people know it is both. Here's the ideas, and then here's how you can actually like apply this. Outside of it being COVID and everybody going online, I mean, is that how you knew that this was the time, or had it already kind of been stirring in your mind?
Yeah, look, I think it had already been stirring because I speak at enough conferences around digital ministry and all of those. So I knew there was this thing, but 100%, COVID was the thing that shifted everybody's thinking, right? Yeah. Because when churches got closed down, a lot of churches just had to scramble for the very first time to even think about what does it look like now to stream our services online. And it's not even just streaming online. It's about, some churches didn't even have podcasts put out. They were leveraging their social media in a way that wasn't extremely inviting or even leveraging in a way that was efficient or effective. And so the pandemic allowed churches to suddenly start to rethink. It was like a Control-Alt-Delete, right? We got to reset everything. Yes. Now, there are some churches for whom, when the pandemic kind of started to wind down and buildings were opened up again, there were a lot of churches who treated that online thing is like a short-term mission trip that they did during COVID, and now we're back and we can just go. And so when they step back into their building, they step back into time. There's certainly churches that did that, and I'm like, that's okay. Like I'm not just an advocate for online stuff. I'm an advocate for churches reaching the people in the community where God has called them to serve. And the pandemic allowed us this opportunity to reset. And we also became super aware as church leaders of all the anxiety and the relational issues within our local community. And so for me, it just seemed like there's not just a digital opportunity here. There's actually a relational opportunity, and leveraging digital technology allows us to be in those places where people are continuing and enhancing their relationships, which is online. It's on their cell phones. So why don't we leverage these to actually connect with the people who live within driving distance of our building? Kristin, this is the biggest lesson I've learned about online. In 2008, when I started as an online pastor, I would go into my church leadership every single week and give them reports. And the big thing that I was pushing constantly was, this is how many people watch, and this is how many countries they were watching from. We had 51 countries who were watching us. And that was the win in 2008, right? Because we didn't really know what we were doing. Over the years, my philosophy around and my theology around this has changed. I'm a big believer that content is not king on social media. Context is king on social media.
Okay, explain that.
So when you can put out a piece of content, right, and that creates a post. It makes a post. That's all it does. Sure. But when you put out a piece of content that speaks to somebody's context, that makes a difference. You can either make a post or you can make a difference, and context is the difference there. And so, you're in North Carolina, you're in Charlotte. Yeah. I would be arguing that your church, Mosaic, should be leveraging all of its technology, social media, YouTube, podcasting, to reach the people who live within driving distance of your locations. That's what I would argue, because you're the best person to do that, right? I'm not going to help them from Australia because I don't know what they're dealing with right now. I don't know what the biggest social issue is in Charlotte. Yeah. I don't know, I don't even know what the temperature in Charlotte is today. So I can't really speak to that context. But likewise, you can create content that people who live within a driving distance of my home here, they might go, hey, that's really helpful. That's a good quote. But I've got the opportunity to actually connect with them relationally and go on that journey with them purely because of context. And so I'm a big believer in the importance of the local church, local. church. We've usually been called to a place to serve in a community. Yet often what people think when they're online is, oh, it's me going out to reach the world. And there are some churches for whom that's their mandate, and God has given them that responsibility, and they should continue to do that. But most of us in church ministry have been called to a specific location to serve that local community. And we should be leveraging the technology available to us to reach people. And this is why I always say, within driving distance of your building, what would that look like? If a church used that as their target audience for everything they put out online, that would change dramatically what they did.
Oh, for sure.
Because it would be much more, audience focused, and the context would become the most important thing.
I think a lot of pastors, church leaders think that that's not enough, right? We have to super go big or go home. And if we're not reaching every single person, then we've failed.
Exactly. Yes. Now there are some churches, some church leaders who have been given that platform. I 100% believe that.
Sure.
But I think the majority of us have been called to and we're passionate about our local area, right? That's passionate about where God live. Yeah. Exactly. That's why we established a church where we live. We're building a community there. But too often what I see on churches when I look at their social media and I look at what they're putting out onto YouTube and those sorts of things, it's stuff that is so generic that it could be for anybody, and it's not targeted towards the people that God has called them specifically to reach. And so that's where I believe context is king when it comes to social media, when it comes to any content that you put out online. The funny thing for me is, you know this, because you're awesome at this. The church is a content creation machine.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you're writing messages all the time. You're creating podcasts all the time. There's YouTube videos. There's all this stuff that we create. And then you look at a church like Mosaic, your students, pastors are doing exactly the same thing. Then your kids ministry people are doing exactly the same thing, creating all of this content constantly. What the church is not good at is distributing that content to the people who need it the most. And so this part of this book is about helping churches distribute that content in a way that reaches the people that God has called them to reach, that they might not have thought about before. We've got all this content, and I know you experience this. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir with you. But,
no, I love it.
You preach these awesome messages at Mosaic, and you then, as a church, you guys put it out onto YouTube to reach a wider audience, and that you understand already that becomes an evergreen piece of content that doesn't have a shelf life like it does in a building. And that works not just for messages; it works for discipleship across the board, right? Because if our discipleship strategy as a church is limited to the seating capacity of our church, then we've missed an opportunity to do what God has called us to do. So which is going to all the world and make disciples. I would just argue that as Mosaic, I don't want to put this on you if this is not right, but I would say you've been called to go into Charlotte and make disciples. That's the first port of call. This is what I love about Jesus. He was so strategic. Go here, then there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we go, well, we're going to go there first, and then we'll work our way backwards. And I think isn't it funny that Jesus had the best social media strategy, 2,000 years ago, and we just now, but we're trying to skip ahead and go, well, I've got YouTube, I can go into all the world now, so I'm going to do that first. And I feel like Jesus going, no, come back to let's just focus on Jerusalem first, and whatever our Jerusalem is, let's just do that first, and then we'll take the next steps.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I was so excited to have you on the podcast after reading MetaChurch, because that's the whole idea of this podcast being called Becoming Church. That's why it's not the Mosaic Church podcast. We do have that also, where we put all the messages and whatnot, but we really are trying to pastor our people and teach our people to be the church outside of, like you've said 100 times, Brilliant. 1 hour on Sundays in one location, which is too why I wanted to be able to have this conversation with you. Cause I'm like, how can I help you get this message out there? Because I think it is so important, but I also feel like there's so much pushback, like the idea of change, right? And we'll get into the practicals of all the tech in a minute, but the idea of change within the church, within religion in and of itself is like, you have some people that love it, but I feel like there are so many people that are like, this is the enemy. You had a quote, you said, if we remain unwilling to reimagine our approach to church, people will do it for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Will you explain your thinking there, and also what the danger is in that?
Yeah, look, for me, if I can like go beyond the book and tell you my personal experience now, right? So I live in a culture in Australia that is 93% unchurched. Only 7% of Australians would say that they would identify as Christian and would say that they go to church on a regular basis. So those 93% of people who live, like for the people who are listening, right? I'm looking out my window now, looking at the houses around me and knowing that 93% of the people who live in the houses around me don't know Jesus and they don't go to church. But I guarantee you, they have a perception of the church. They've got an imagined, this is what I imagine church is like. And that's what I mean by that. They're reimagining church for us because they've already got a perspective of what Christians are like and what Jesus is like and what church is like. And it's incumbent upon us as church leaders to change that perspective. Because let's be honest, their perspective is not the actual perspective. Their perspective is not real, not the reality. They probably think, but
it's Christians, their reality.
It's their reality. You know, every time I talk about this with my unchurched friends, they think the church is just against everything. Christians are against everything. And I'm always like, well, you know, the most famous Bible verse in the world starts with the word for, right? For God. So what if Christians were known for what we were for? What if the people around me who aren't Christians, what if their view of Christians were, you know what, I don't know if I agree with what that Dave Adamson guy says and believes, but I want my kids, I'm a business owner and I want to hire his daughters because they are the most generous, compassionate, integrity-filled people in our local community. Hey, I don't know if I agree with what Dave Adamson sings about when he's at church and what he talks about Jesus on his Instagram posts, but you know what? I want my sons to marry his daughters because I know they're going to be part of a family that is generous and compassionate and a loving and a community. Wouldn't that be awesome if that was our reputation? But our reputation isn't that. And that's what I mean by reimagining we need to reimagine, help people reimagine what church is by being in the community. And this is the thing, you know, Kristin, if you go to a party and you get introduced to somebody for the first time and all they do is talk to you about themselves, how good they are, how good the things they're doing is, and here's all the achievements that I've had in the past week, you would probably like walk away after a couple, be polite because you're a polite person, but you would probably walk away and go, well, I don't want to have a conversation with that person again.
Right.
Yet you look at church social media and that's what we do, right? We
like a bulletin board. Yes,
we only talk about ourselves and how good, oh my gosh, our service was the best. I'm so disappointed you missed it. But what if we started talking about the local community and started saying, hey, local high school in Charlotte won the high school football championship. Let's cheer them on. Hey, today we're praying for all of the emergency services leaders in Charlotte. What if we talked about the things that are happening in the community? This is the community festival that's going on. This is the library. This is hey, here's 10 things you can do in Charlotte on a rainy day. Hey, it's snowing in Charlotte. Here's the best sightseeing spots for families. Like those sorts of things are actually helpful to the local community. And it lets the community know that the church is there. And the idea behind this is you want the local community to know that your church is there, to be happy that your church is there, and to be better off because your church is there. But what we post on social media is just about ourselves. Look at us, look what we did. This Sunday is going to be the best Sunday ever because Pastor Kristin is writing a message. She's going to present the best message of her life. Your relationships are going to be restored. You're going to lose 50 pounds. You're going to grow new hair if you're bald. You're going to find a spouse if you haven't got one. Like that's how we kind of sell our church services when we could be just real about it and go, hey, this Sunday at church, Pastor Kristin's delivering a message and she's going to give you 3 things you can do to improve every relationship in your life. I would go, oh, I want to go to that. I need some help with my relationships. I'm going to do that. If you understand that they're the needs that people have in the community. This comes down to relevance for me. We have this idea in church that relevance is smoke machines, moving lights, cool
I was going to say music. Yes.
T-shirts, right? Skinny jeans, whatever it might be, right? But relevance is meeting somebody's need in the moment that they have it. If I'm in the middle of the ocean and I've been stranded in the ocean with just a life vest for a week and I'm starving and I'm on the edge of death. And Kristin, you show up in a boat and you pull me in and you give me a drink of water, I don't care what brand of water you give me. I don't care what type of boat you are the most relevant person in the world to me because you've given me the thing that I need most, right?
Yeah.
I don't care what brand of crackers you give me. Right. So if we want to be relevant in the community, if we want to be relevant as a church, we need to be meeting the needs of our local community. That's what I mean by that whole reimagining thing. But I believe we have a window at the moment. As the capital C church, we have a window of innovation that's open to us at the moment. And the pandemic created that. See, most churches, if you think of the church growth on a bell curve, right? You think we all know what a bell curve is. For the people listening, I'm literally drawing it in the air right now as if Kristin doesn't know what a bell curve is. But we think once the church gets to the top of that growth bell curve, we think that's time to innovate, but it's actually not. Because the risk of innovation at that point is so high. If it fails, we plummet down. In reality, church attendance has been plummeting for a while. Like it's not just, this was pre-pandemic. Right. People who not only did less people attend church than ever before, but even people who said they were Christians were stopping attending church. It went from once every 2 weeks to once every 4 weeks to once every 6 weeks. People who attend church had stopped attending church. But the pandemic gave us this opportunity, this unique opportunity to have a window of innovation where we can create something new now, and we might get another spike in that bell curve that might start going up again because there was such a world-changing situation that hit us. So now's the time for us to innovate more than ever, I believe. And that might not mean coming up with the newest technology. It might not mean suddenly live stream. For some churches, the most innovative thing you could do is to not live stream your service. It might just be to up your Instagram account and reach the local people in your local community and put the resources that you usually use for your live streaming to that side of things rather than live streaming. We think that innovation looks like this. No, innovation is just doing things differently. And this is where, my old boss, Andy Stanley, says it best. We have to date the model, but marry the mission. Our model should change. Our method should change. And so I would be arguing that right now we have the best opportunity to use 21st century technology to fulfill Jesus's first century mandate to go into all the world and make disciples, because we have the best discipleship tool available to us, our cell phones. People have in their pocket, church leaders listening to this, the people who live within a driving distance of your building have in their pocket every single day and have at arm's reach every day. 91% of adults have their phone within arm's reach all day. What they have there, exactly, right? Mm-hmm. What they have there is a pulpit, a small group, a worship team, and an offering plate in their pocket. Yeah. We just need to be able to understand how we can and be strategic in how we leverage that, how we connect with them via that. And it's not coming out asking them to give straight away. It's letting them know we understand the context that you live in, and we're here to help you get better at life. We're here to help you get better at your relationships. Helping them in that way is the front door into the church, I believe.
Yeah. Wow.
I feel like I'm fire hosting. I'm sorry.
No, I love it so much. I'm sitting here taking it all in. My question is for people that are listening, right? For church leaders that are listening, going, before I get there, I will get there. I really love that you said maybe for some churches, it's not doing live stream, but focusing on Instagram, because I think that one of the lies that we believe is we have to do all of it and we have to do everything. I've been in meetings where we're like, why doesn't our church have a TikTok? And I'm like, because I can't manage one more platform right now. Literally, that's why, and so I think you just gave people permission to do what works best instead of trying to do everything at once. But for the people that are listening that maybe would push back against digital ministry or online church, I feel like a lot of people jumped in during the pandemic out of either fear or lack of control, or they felt like they had no other option, right? Where they were like, we're doing this because it's literally all there is. Yeah. But now that we're able to go back, I'm seeing a lot of that decline. Yeah. Right? Why?
The main piece of pushback that I have, and it's coming up all the time again now, it's the same pushback I was getting in 2008 when I first became an online pastor. And it's the idea that, it's deliberately, it's straight from Hebrews 10:25, right? Let us not give up gathering together. That's what people will always, if I had $1 for every time that had been quoted to me, that would be awesome. But the interesting thing about that for me, Kristin, is that in the first century, when the writer of Hebrews wrote that, there was only one way to gather, right? That physical was the only way, but the method has changed. The method of gathering has changed dramatically over the years, and we need to be leveraging that. You know, Hebrews also says that the word of God is active. That means that it's constantly, it's relevant in every cultural context, in every situation, in every time. Like, just because it was written in the first century, we all know that God's word is still alive right now. But that idea, we don't want to believe that when it comes to Hebrews 10:25. And the reason we don't want to believe it when it comes to Hebrews 10:25, if I can get really brutal here, is I think for too long in church world, we have measured our success as church leaders, and we've measured our self-esteem and our self-worth by the number of people who are sitting in front of us. And we spiritualize that by quoting Hebrews 10:25, but really it's about serving us.
Yeah.
And if we really want to reach the community, there are so many unchurched people who live around church buildings. And if we want to really reach them, I think we need to have a new unit of measurement. And that doesn't mean that Hebrews 10:25 comes undone. No, because I do believe we need to gather together. This is the thing. I've never met an online pastor, myself included, who believes that online could or should replace on-site. We don't say that. It's an enhancement to.
It's a both.
That's what it is for me. Yeah. It's a both and world that we live in. And that's where Hebrews 10:25 for me is not pushback anymore. It's just like, well, let's talk about where you're getting your self-esteem from and how you're measuring the success of your church. Because the success of your church shouldn't just be the number of people who are sitting in seats, but it should be the life change that's happening. How many people are engaged with your church? How many people are in small groups? How many people are serving in your church? How many people are serving in the community because of their service in your church? How many people are financially, have a financial plan to support your? These are the things that we should be marking as engagement, and that can happen online or on site. And it's funny, Micah says that we need to bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, right? So that implies the only offerings we should be accepting in church is the ones that get put physically in the plate. No, but we're all open to, no, you cash out
Venmo,
money, you Venmo me money, you do it direct. We're all happy with online giving, but online attendance takes a swing at that point. And so for me, the Bible verse that I typically come back to when it comes to countering, I guess, that is Acts 2:47, which says, which is the verse that every pastor loves. Oh my gosh, we love it, because every day God added to the number of those who are being saved. Yes, we want that. That's our home run. That's our North Star. But Acts 2:46 says, and they met together every day. So we want the Acts 2:47 payoff, but we're not willing to put in the Acts 2:46 work. But guess what? Technology allows us to do that right now. We can post daily Bible devotions for our church community and meet with them every day online, whether that's in a Zoom prayer room, which, Mark Batterson's church has started doing during the pandemic and has continued to do. They call it the Upper Zoom. Best name ever.
Hilarious.
So they do the whole church gets together and prays every Tuesday at some weird hour, like 7:14 a.m. or something. Like, there's little things like that we can do that create these touch points so that we can gather together every day with the people who are in our church community, so that God will ultimately add to our number those who are being saved. But it comes about only if we start to do those things strategically. It doesn't come back by us wishful thinking. We have to actually be strategic about it and do some things. I've quoted this a couple of times while we've been talking. Go into all the world, right? Go into all the world. I did this huge research from the Hebrew and the Greek of that word go. And did you know that it actually means to go? That's all it means. It just means go. It actually just do it. Just do. That's literally what it implies, is to just start doing it. So I really believe we have to start doing some things around this technology in this space to make those connections every single day. And we have a great opportunity to do it. Now, to your point, right? Not every church has the resources to do that on a consistent basis. So we have to figure out the things that are working and what's working right now. And I know, like in the book, I talk a lot about YouTube. For me, if I was to say to a church, if somebody's listening to this going, that's great, I agree. What do I do next? What's the first thing I can do? I don't have many resources. Maybe I'm a pastor of a church and I'm the only person on staff, or maybe it's me and one other person who's half-time, right? Yeah. I would be saying the thing that I would focus on first and foremost, the biggest priority for me would be to do short form vertical video. And this has changed since I wrote the book. It's honestly changed in the last couple of months. I think short form vertical video is the way of the future, and every church pastor needs to be getting on that. It's not overproduced stuff. It's not highly produced. It's highly authentic. And so that might look like just getting your your phone out and holding it vertical and just doing a quick video that says, "Hey church, hi people of Charlotte, I just wanted to let you know I'm praying for you guys right now, and specifically I feel like I need to be praying about these 4 things, and I hope you'll join me in prayer." Like something like that, and posting that to YouTube as a YouTube short, or to TikTok, or to Instagram as an Instagram reel. That's the sort of thing that's getting a lot of traction at the moment. If all churches did was that would make a huge difference in connecting with the local community, but make it contextualized to where God has called you to serve.
That makes sense. And in short form, just for practicalities, is what, like 3 minutes or less, right? Or not quite that short?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for 3 minutes or less. When it comes to YouTube Shorts, it has to be 60 seconds. So it can be even shorter again. And somebody asked me the other day, hey, what are the top 3 platforms that you would suggest any church leader use in priority order? And I said YouTube Shorts, TikTok, YouTube. And YouTube is different to YouTube Shorts, right?
Yeah.
And people were like, well, what would be 4th and 5th then? And I said Facebook and Instagram in that order: YouTube Shorts, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And Instagram for me has plummeted from number 1 to number 5. And the reason for that is algorithmically, Instagram at the moment doesn't really know what they're doing, because they're trying to get into the short form vertical video space, and they're just not doing as good. The reason that YouTube Shorts is number 1 for me is people understand YouTube. I think a lot of churches understand YouTube more than they understand TikTok. But YouTube Shorts, like YouTube, is a search engine, so it's searchable. You can find that content that you need. And so this is a big part of what I write in the book as well, about this 0 moment of truth, right? When people have a question, they're not going to the church to find answers, they're going to Google to find answers. And so we need to be, as church leaders, in that Google space with answers to the questions. And because Google owns YouTube, Google will always throw up YouTube videos as the answer to those questions. Kristin, one of the great things, can I tell you something really I'm so excited about?
Yeah.
I'm working with an organization in Australia called Alpha Australia. Alpha is a pretty well-known brand in Christian circles. Have you heard of Alpha? It's a short form. No. It's like a introduction to faith series that came out of England. It's a 6-week course that churches can put on. Anyway, with Alpha Australia, I'm helping them with their YouTube. And what we decided to do, what the strategy is, we found that my team and I, we researched the top 100 most highly searched faith questions: Jesus, Bible, God, faith, church, most highly searched faith questions in Australia, geotagged to Australia. And so we wrote out this list of 100 top 100 questions that unchurched people are asking. And we're creating 2 to 3 minute pieces of content that answer those questions. Now, it's funny, right? Some of the questions are like, could Jesus cook a burrito so hot that Jesus couldn't eat it? That's one of the questions. But then there's other questions like, is masturbation a sin? Questions like, if I have tattoos, can I get into heaven? Like, these are genuine questions that people are asking. That's the obstacle for them getting to faith. And this organization, Alpha Australia, is answering those 100 questions in short videos. And I keep saying to church leaders, find the 50 most highly searched faith questions in your area, in Charlotte. You find those 50 questions, add in Easter and Christmas, you've got a year's worth of content.
Yeah.
We package series up because we think that that's how we're supposed to do things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. That's still a great approach to teaching, right? Sure. But imagine if you found the 50 top questions in Charlotte that people have, and you wrote a message for each one of those questions, and then you add Christmas and Easter to it. How much more helpful is that to the unchurched people who live within Charlotte and who live within driving distance of Mosaic? Like that. And that's pretty simple to do. And you can do that for free. Use Google auto prompt to literally find those questions, because they're geotag searches. So it's really easy to do. And anyway, these are just things that I think churches can do to leverage technology beyond just that. Well, I'm streaming my services, so I'm doing everything I can. There's other things you can be doing which might be more helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and I love that in the book, you even, like, you just listed a couple of things you were very helpful in the book too, with go here and go here and here. Cause I'm sitting there reading. So to fill you in a tiny bit, I am a teaching pastor. I also kind of have my hand on a lot of other things right now. I'm our communications person. I'm now our social media person. I am now our YouTube person. What started for me as writing content, like being on the teaching team and writing emails and, maybe like Instagram posts, has now grown. Like all of this stuff. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, don't tell them. But I'm having to like teach myself as I go. So for people like me who already feel like they're stretched so thin, and I'm talking, this can apply to church staffers or even people listening who feel like part of their, just ministry as a Christian, as a Jesus follower, is to utilize their social media, how do we do it without burning out more than we already are?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I would be suggesting, first and foremost, like I said earlier, right? We are content creation machines, but we're not content distribution machines. We're not really good at distributing that content well. So I would say this: repurpose on purpose. What I mean by that is, Kristin, how long does it take you to write a message on average?
Oh my gosh. I mean, hours. Well, also I usually write it and then delete it and then start over.
And I know you don't do that the week of. I know you're doing this in advance. You're probably working on multiple messages, but let's for argument's sake, say that it takes 2 days. So 16 hours, 16 hours, 2 work days to write a message, right? Then take that message and repurpose it as much as possible. And if you're writing that message with the end goal in mind of not just being in the service preaching it, but all the multiple other facets, it starts to change it starts to shift your thinking a little bit. It certainly has for me anyway. So when I'm preparing a message, the way that I prepare that message is I'm thinking, how is this going to come across on YouTube as well as in the room, right? But then I'm also thinking of what parts of this can I take to turn into social media graphics? What part of this could I chop up into a quick 30-second little Instagram reel or a 60-second YouTube short? And so I'm thinking through that process, and it's become second nature to me in a whole bunch of ways, right? It totally has. But I'm not creating multiple pieces of content at that point. I'm creating one piece of pillar content, and then I'm breaking that up for individual platforms during the week so that it gets distributed in a different way, because people are accessing content in different ways. Some people prefer podcasts. Like, podcast audience has increased year on year since 2016. And the reason for that is we multitask. So, even just taking that message and turning it into a podcast is super helpful. But then how we leverage that podcast to connect people to our church. Hey, if you like more content like this, you should go to blah, 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 whatever that might be. Even little things like that are huge. But it's not about recreating more content. It's just that pillar content that you're creating, whether it's for the adult service, whether it's for the student services or for the kids ministry, and repurposing that content in multiple different ways. That gives you a whole bunch of different pieces of content that you can post, right? And I break this down in the book, how you can take one 37-minute message and turn it into about 18 different pieces of content that you can use throughout the week. But on top of that, I think too often as churches, when I work with churches, one of the biggest problems I have expressed to me is I just don't have time to keep creating content. I keep running out of ideas. I think we feel this pressure to always be posting content, when I think the best thing that a lot of us can do is just to respond to content that's out there already. So what if we went into, you live in Charlotte, and your church is in Charlotte. What is a restaurant in Charlotte that you absolutely love? I'm going to do a live example here. Well, like you and your husband
Velvet Taco.
on date night go to, where is it?
Velvet Taco.
Okay, first of all, best name ever. That is
great, right?
I love
and
it.
The
Second,
best tacos.
Mexican. I'm all on board. So what if part of your strategy was, hey, as a church, we're not going to post today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to find restaurants like the Velvet Taco, and as the church, I'm just going to respond, hey, that's such a great Instagram photo. Hey, I love that meal. Our team might come there for lunch this week. What if your staff goes out to lunch
just in the comments?
Yes, just in their comments. So for me, on Twitter, this is one of the things that I do, which it's hilarious. I'm always trying to think of ways to post new Twitter content, but what I find is when I'm commenting on other people's posts that are already out there, whether they're Christian or not, I end up with a lot more followers as a result, because people like my engagement with a content that's not mine. So sometimes the best way, it's like that party example I said, right? I can either talk at you constantly, or I can ask you questions about yourself and get involved and respond to what the conversations you're having. I guarantee you this, church leaders in Charlotte, there are conversations happening in your local community that your input would be valuable in, but you're not having those conversations because you're too worried about what is the next thing I'm going to talk about. You know, when you're having a conversation and how many of us are going, oh, good, she's just said something really interesting and I can't wait. I'm not listening anymore because I'm just thinking of the next thing I'm going to add to. But that's what we do on social media. What if we just listened for a while on social media and then responded to stuff that other people are posting? Every church in the world should be following on their social media platforms, not other pastors, but the community leaders in their town, the schools, the fire, the emergency services people, the libraries, the government agencies, the counselors, the restaurants, the cafes. That's who we should be following because we want to be part of the community. The only way the community is going to come to us is if we go out to them and let them know we're there. And sometimes the best thing you can do is to not post on social media, but just to listen and comment on other people's social media platforms. That would be another big thing I would be suggesting.
I love that. And that's something that people can incorporate, quickly and easily. And that's
real quick.
Brilliant. Yes. Okay. Well, you truly you make me all energized and revitalized to go out and I'm glad. I can rule the social media, digital ministry world again.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yes.
Really glad to hear that. I want to, if I can just state one more thing, really overstate this. It doesn't take a lot, y'all. I know there's pastors out there who don't have the resources that I had at North Point, and I totally know that. The best thing that you can do is we've all got, this is the funny thing, right? We have all got a $1,000 camera in our pocket, and God provided the best lighting available, the sun. If you just get out and hold your phone up to your face and turn so that the sun's in, the lighting from the sun is there. You can create content that is really highly authentic and highly genuine. And the production stuff, that's not as big a deal as that genuineness that we have. And so I would be encouraging everybody to just right now turn and face a window and just tell somebody what your favorite Bible verse is and why that's your favorite Bible verse. Don't just quote the Bible verse. Why? How did that change your life?
Don't throw it at them like a Bible bomb.
Exactly. But how did that verse make your life better and make you better at life? Like if that's all you did and you say, I'm going to do that every Tuesday, I'm going to read one Bible verse and tell you why it made my life better and made me better at life. There's one piece of content already taken care of. Do it in a 60-second video. It doesn't have to be polished. Things like that are the easiest way to do social media, easiest way to use technology and online. And it doesn't require a whole team to live stream a service and mix the service and all of those sorts of things. It's really simple for us to do if we think about it in a different way than we've been thinking about it. And if we're prepared to change our model. I know people push back on that because, hey, church tradition. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. It's time for us to start changing things up a little bit too, because what is the faith of the next generation worth? It's worth everything. I think it's worth us innovating. I want my kids, Kristin, I want your kids to know Jesus. And if we're going to reach them, we need to change our model to reach that generation. It's really important. And it's not just the next generation, it's the current generation.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question because the podcast is called Becoming Church. And you, again, I'm going to quote you again back to yourself. You said the church needs to find its identity in who they are rather than where they are. Again, that's the whole heart of what Becoming Church is about.
Yeah.
What is a way that you think people can become the church right now where they are?
This is a good question because I think it goes beyond just church leaders, right? This is the people
Oh, for sure.
If you say you're a follower of Jesus, you are part of the capital C church.
Absolutely.
And that's not something that church is not a place we go to. Church is who we are. Church is the things that we do. And so for me, I was the church yesterday. And part of the way I was the church yesterday was I met a guy from a Christian organization. He was coming into town. The story's going somewhere, believe me. He was coming to town, he wanted to meet with me. I said, let's meet at the local brewery, which is like, a mile and a half from my house. He's like, oh, okay, a brewery. Okay. We get to the brewery. And when he walked in, I was talking to one of the waiters. Then one of the waitresses came over and said hi to me by name. And I said hi back to her by name. And he's like, do you come here often? And I'm like, yeah. Oh, wow. And I could see the mind ticking over. This is a guy who's a pastor and he comes to a brewery often. I know what he was thinking, and I know what some of your listeners are thinking. But for me, why would I not want to be in those places? Because I think we become the church when we serve our community in the way and meet the needs that they have in the moment that they need them. And so for me, getting to know the people who work at the local brewery where I know is close enough to my house that I'm going to be there a bit, is me trying to have influence with them so that ultimately I can help them reimagine what it means to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, Christians don't go into a brewery. In my mind, why wouldn't I go there? Because that's where the unchurched people are. And isn't that what Jesus would have done? But I think too often, and I know you follow me on social media, you might have seen me post this, but I think too often we sit at the tables that Jesus turned over. Jesus turned up at more tables than he turned over. And so that for me is an indication that we have to show up at more people's tables in order to be the church. You know what's interesting? The Hebrew word for altar, that place in the church where the Bible sits and all, where we preach from, the Hebrew word for altar is the exact same word as the Hebrew word for the table that you would have dinner at, the table that you would have coffee at. And there's this rabbinic saying that every table is an altar. Because at every table, we have the opportunity to talk about God. We have the opportunity to introduce people to Jesus. At every table, we have the opportunity to be the church. You want to be the church? Sit at more tables. That's what I would say. That's my answer. And I just thought of that then. I'm going to tweet that. You want to be the church? Be the church by showing up at more tables and just inviting people to have conversations with us. Too often, oh gosh, our faith either invites people to have arguments or it invites people to have conversations. I just want to be the church by inviting people into conversations and answering questions, or saying, I don't have an answer to that question, but let's journey it out together. Right? We're closer to, one of my favorite theologians, Abraham Joshua Heschel, says, we're closer to God when we have questions than when we think we have all the answers. And so sitting down at tables and having conversations, I think that's the best way to be the church.
Yeah. I love that. I can't wait till you tweet that. I'll like it for you. I'll retweet it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. Listen, if I ever make it to Australia, which I want to, we will grab a beer at the brewery and then we will sit down. We'll watch all of Bluey.
Oh,
like all of it.
Gosh. Yes, please. We have to make that happen. I'm actually going to be in the States soon. If I'm coming through North Carolina, I'll come and say hi.
Oh, please. That would be so great.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. I hope that you are just as energized and ready to go out there and do your digital ministry as I am. Listen, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you found any little nugget or probably 13 in what Dave said today, please go get the book. MetaChurch, not only does he give practicals, but there are PDF downloads. There are step-by-step things. It is so helpful as someone who just wants to utilize social media in a way of becoming the church to people around them. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We will link up all of Dave's things, the book, where you can follow him on social media, and maybe a link to Bluey in the show notes. We'll talk to you next time.